Can you come out? I really have to go.
Supervillains are fun and all, but in my opinion, nothing beats a good villain henchman.
Oh my God! Juggernaut!
And in today's list, I'm going to talk about not only what defines a good henchman, but also talk about a few Marvel henchmen, both in comics and in the MCU, who are definitely stronger than their bosses.
How would you like a joke?
And what did these henchmen do with this strength?
I'm gonna rip you in half now.
Did they eventually rise up to be the main bad guy? Did they eventually turn good? There's a lot to talk about, so let's get started right now.
Are you ready, Dr. Zola?
There's not any rivalry quite like the Wolverine and Sabretooth relationship in the comics. It's been a consistent feature of X-Men comics for years, and the two are like yin and yang, always circling each other and usually ending up fighting. But although a lot of Sabretooth's fame comes from his relationship with Wolverine, I would say he's also been a reliable henchman for other villains. That's because for a lot of his early career, Sabretooth was a mercenary. In his first comic appearance, Sabretooth actually appeared as an enemy to Iron Fist, and imagine what that character would have gone through if that stayed that way permanently. No offense to Iron Fist, but Wolverine and Sabretooth just seem like a match made in heaven. Anyway, back to the villain's early days. He was working as an enforcer to whoever would hire him, and that generally worked whenever comic writers needed a villain for heroes to beat up. Of course, these were just the humble beginnings for the character, and he would go on to have a much larger role and become a vital part of a lot of important X-Men comics. See, this first entry is to show that you don't always have to be a henchman forever. Set your goals high, people. You know what I consider a sign of a true rock-solid henchman? The ones who can think for themselves. That's why Razor Fist, who appeared in Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, earns a spot on this list. But let me explain because I know what you're thinking. Razor Fist is the henchman for Wenwu, and Wenwu is an incredibly strong, immortal villain with all-powerful rings, while Razor Fist just has a sharp blade that he can poke you with. On the surface, that doesn't seem any way like an equal comparison, but let's actually look at the film. You want to know my main reason? Because Razor Fist clearly is not delusional. Wenwu's downfall in The Legend of the Ten Rings came when he stubbornly refused to admit that it wasn't his deceased wife's soul calling out to him from the big evil gate, but rather an ancient evil that could destroy the world. Wenwu was so blinded by his desire to save his true love again that he wasn't listening to common sense. And hey, I get it, love is the most powerful force in the universe and all that. But then, let's look at Razor Fist. He comes to Ta Lo completely on Wenwu's side, ready to fight the villagers, but as soon as he realizes that Wenwu was wrong and they need the villagers' help to not have their souls sucked out of them, he immediately switches sides. Respect. Plus, Razor Fist is no slouch in the fighting department, clearly giving Shang-Chi a run for his money in that epic bus fight. That means Razor Fist could also probably do pretty well against Wenwu if necessary. Thor, Doctor Strange, Hulk, Spider-Man, Cyclops, Spider-Woman. What do all these heroes have in common? They've all been beaten by the Juggernaut. But who is this beast of a man? Well, he's actually just a normal dude by the name of Cain Marko, who happened to stumble upon a mystical jewel that turned him into a human Juggernaut. Don't ya hate it when that happens? Ever since then, Juggernaut has been a go-to henchman for hire for a lot of villains who need extra muscle. And by extra muscle, I mean extra large muscle with a side of muscle and a muscle dipping sauce. Juggernaut is almost unstoppable, and it's been noted that he can lift 100 tons pretty effortlessly if he wanted. So yeah, if you're ever a bad guy looking for a henchman and you don't mind someone who's clearly going to be stronger than you, then I immediately recommend Juggernaut. Alright, I'm going to be devoting this entry to talking about Thor: The Dark World, and I know that the film is nobody's favorite MCU movie, and that's mainly because of the walking melatonin that is Malekith the Dark Elf. But I think his henchman deserves a bit more love. I mean, how many henchmen can say they are responsible for an Avengers parent's demise? I mean, I guess at least one other who appears on this list, but I still think it's a rare occurrence. And it highlights just how powerful Malekith's right-hand monster really is. Malekith is often busy being the equivalent of a glass of warm milk before bed, so he actually leaves a lot of the heavy lifting to his henchman Kurse. And Kurse wasn't always Kurse. Before, he was just a regular dark elf named Algrim the Strong, who was so loyal to Malekith that he agreed to sacrifice his own life to become the last of the cursed, which is basically like a super soldier version of dark elves. Side effects included pointy horns erupting all over his body and making it so he'd have trouble fitting inside normal doorways ever again. But Kurse definitely lived up to the hype as he dispatched Frigga with ruthless efficiency. I don't think any of Malekith's plans up until the ending would have worked without Kurse, and that's the sign of a truly awesome henchman. And yeah, if he wanted to, I don't doubt that Kurse could have squashed Malekith into jelly. I mean, this was the henchman that was stabbed by Loki, but then turned around, picked up Loki, and stabbed the god of mischief with the blade that was currently sticking out of his own chest. That's a main villain move if I ever saw one. The only downside with Kurse is that he committed the classic bad guy mistake of having very dangerous black hole grenades strapped to his body that Loki was able to detonate and eliminate Kurse once and for all. While the Red Skull was busy obsessing over the cosmic cube, it was his right-hand man that really kept the lights on in the whole Hydra operation. Yes, Red Skull was the one who first recreated the super soldier serum, and that should normally be grounds for celebration. But there were horrible side effects, like turning him into a walking Halloween costume, so I can't really count that as a success. But while Red Skull was busy with that, it's Arnim who was making all the cool stuff. He made exoskeleton battle suits and all sorts of weapons, and started to dive into studying the paranormal and occult sciences. The dude had a wide range of talents is all I'm saying. He even basically accidentally discovered a way to amplify the Tesseract's energy and copy it so they could design better suits and weapons and all that fun destructive stuff. Without Zola, Red Skull might just have wound up as one of those party clowns you can rent for birthday parties. But Zola is actually an example of a henchman who got even stronger after the main villain was taken care of. While Red Skull was stuck on Vormir, forced to guard a treasure that he himself could not possess, Arnim was busy turning his subconscious into a supercomputer and effectively helping Hydra infiltrate S.H.I.E.L.D. over a course of many years. That's seriously impressive. I think the Winter Soldier is one of the most effective henchmen of all time in the MCU. For decades, whenever Hydra and the Soviets had an issue with someone, they could just defrost their favorite barnsicle and send him to go do the job, then put him back on ice later. Easy as that. I mean, what more could you want from a henchman? If I was the main villain, I'd love someone like Winter Soldier working for me, because they would likely never betray me, would get the job done efficiently, and I wouldn't have to stand around and create small talk with them. That's a big benefit. And Bucky is incredibly powerful on top of that. He's his own version of a super soldier, and that comes with all those sweet super soldier perks like super strength, enhanced speed, reflexes, and durability. His signature accessory, though, is his metal arm. He lost his original arm after plummeting from that train, but they gave him a better one. Now, in the MCU specifically, we haven't seen the arm upgraded with fancy gadgets like there should be, and that's a missed opportunity. But I still think Bucky is a great henchman. In fact, while he was a henchman working for Hydra, he was responsible for the event that would eventually drive a wedge into the Avengers team and cause them to split up. He was the one responsible for assassinating the Starks in a truly brutal way that ranks up there as one of the most gruesome moments in the entire MCU. Then, following this event, Cap's protection of Bucky, followed by Tony's emotional outburst, led to the Avengers completely falling apart. Yes, so as a henchman, Bucky did his job perfectly. And is he still a henchman? Obviously not, but I feel like he's being treated as one. At the end of the Falcon and the Winter Soldier TV show, the title card changed to say Captain America and the Winter Soldier, which was cool and all, but Bucky deserved a name change too after spending the series trying to move on from his Winter Soldier years. I'm just saying. Although I liked the Black Widow movie, one thing that will stick out to me the most is how underutilized Taskmaster was. It's one of the worst examples of an underdeveloped villain the MCU has ever had, and that's surprising given how far they've come since their early phase villain problem. Taskmaster just didn't live up to the character's potential, which is a real shame because it's clear just how powerful Antonia Dreykov could be. The main villain of the film is her father, General Dreykov, who has spent his life controlling Black Widows and basically making them act like mindless lackeys. But he's clearly not in the best fighting shape, so that's why he has Taskmaster. Now, Antonia has an astonishing ability where she can mimic other people's fighting styles just by watching and practicing, which leads to some great scenes where Taskmaster fights as Captain America, Black Panther, and even Hawkeye. That's a really fun concept and makes Taskmaster one of the most dangerous henchmen alive. But again, the movie didn't explore that enough. Maybe in the future? I love the Bullseye name. It's such a straightforward, simple description that tells you exactly what you need to know about the character. He's one of the most accurate marksmen in the world and can basically hit anything with anything. He doesn't miss all that much, unless he's fighting an important main superhero or something. But still, he's incredibly dangerous and you wouldn't want to cross him. And he's one of those mercenaries that's usually working for someone else. Kingpin and Bullseye are a classic comic fit, and although Kingpin is a beast of a man, I would still say Bullseye is more powerful in terms of ability. Like, Kingpin is normally just a really big dude. Just run away from him if necessary. Yes, I know it's not that easy, but it seems like it would be easier to escape from Kingpin than from the master assassin who doesn't miss. You turn your back to Bullseye and then all of a sudden you have a knife, a bullet, a pencil, or something all lodged into your back. And yes, besides Kingpin, Bullseye has worked for a wide variety of other villains. What's the most fun out of his comic history? Probably the time that a disguised Mysterio hired Bullseye to steal a baby. Comics are wild. The Sentry is probably the most powerful hero in Marvel Comics that we haven't seen introduced in the MCU yet, and that's a real shame because he's a fascinating character. Essentially the Marvel version of Superman, for real this time and not whatever they advertised Icarus to be in the Eternals. The Sentry is said to have the strength of 1,000,000 exploding suns, but there's a catch. Even though he's one of the greatest heroes in the world, he also has an evil side of him called the Void, which gets more powerful the stronger the Sentry gets. So it's a real problem. Would you want one of the strongest heroes in the universe on your side if it meant also potentially unleashing an all-powerful villain? That's a question I hope the MCU answers one day. But for now, let's talk about the Sentry as a henchman. He's normally not one, but I wanted to include him here because there was a time where he was basically Norman Osborn's big gun. When Norman Osborn was put in charge of the 50-state initiative of superheroes, he essentially used a Sentry to keep everyone in line and to make them all loyal to him. It's an instance where Sentry is clearly more powerful than Norman Osborn, but Osborn is a master manipulator who influenced events to get what he wanted. Yes, although it might seem crazy now, in the early days, Deadpool was nothing more than a henchman willing to work for the highest bidder. That's insane to think about. Like, sure, the whole thing with Deadpool is that he's a mercenary for hire, but he gives off such lead character energy that it's hard to fathom him playing second fiddle to anyone. But that's what he was like in his early appearances. First showing up in the New Mutants number 98, Deadpool was hired by the main villain Tolliver to hunt down Nathan Christopher Charles Summers, aka Cable. That's right, the best bromance in all of comics, or second best probably besides Deadpool and Spider-Man, started off with Deadpool hunting down Cable. That's fun. And honestly, Deadpool didn't do so well on his first mission. He was putting up a pretty solid fight against Cable and his friends until Domino shows up and throws some knives in his back, completely incapacitating the merc with a mouth. And it's weird because you see the bare bones of the character Deadpool would go on to become with his sarcasm and all that, but it also doesn't really feel like Deadpool. Of course, Deadpool would eventually go on to become one of the most popular Marvel heroes ever, and we know his regeneration powers are some of the best in the business, which means I consider him one of the best and most powerful henchmen ever. He was a henchman that had so much personality that he had to become a main character, and I think that's pretty cool. You know who's the most powerful henchman of all time? That one guy in Iron Man 3 who immediately put his gun down and didn't want to fight Iron Man. All of a sudden, that guy became the smartest man on Earth for looking at the situation and realizing how bad of an idea fighting Tony Stark would be. I wonder what he's up to now.